There was a time, long before the sterile beep of a credit card or the thin, papery rustle of a dollar bill, when value was something you could feel in the palm of your hand. It wasn't just a number on a screen. It had a weight, a texture, and sometimes a heartbeat. If you walked into a marketplace 4,000 years ago, the money in your pocket might have been alive, or it might have been something so fragile that a single drop of water could destroy your entire life savings. But there is one specific item, a small, unassuming object found on beaches, that served as the world's first truly global currency. It connected empires and fueled the darkest parts of human history, yet most of us today treat it as a mere trinket. Why did this one object hold such a terrifying grip over the global economy for centuries, and what was the hidden flaw that eventually made it worthless? Before we uncover that mystery, we have to understand the first way humans ever said, "I owe you," which involved something much more personal than a coin. Long before banks, we had the tally stick. Imagine the smell of freshly shaven wood and the sound of a sharp blade biting into a branch. This wasn't just a piece of wood, it was a legally binding contract. You might think a piece of wood is easy to forge. After all, anyone can carve a notch, right? But the tally stick had a security feature so ingenious that it remained the primary way the British Empire tracked its debt until the 1820s. Think about the social etiquette of the medieval village. You didn't have a wallet, you had a stick. When you bought grain from a neighbor, you'd carve a notch representing the amount. But the magic happened next. The stick was split down the middle. The creditor kept one half, the stock, where we get the word stockholder, and the debtor kept the other, the foil. The grain of the wood was like a fingerprint. If you tried to add an extra notch to your half to claim someone owed you more, the two halves wouldn't match up when pressed together. It was the world's first unhackable database. The tally stick worked perfectly until 1834, when the British government decided to burn their old sticks, accidentally setting the House of Parliament on fire. But while a stick could track a debt, it couldn't be traded easily across oceans. For that, humanity turned to something much more beautiful, but it carried a secret biological curse. For centuries, the most successful currency in history wasn't gold. It was the cowrie shell. It was small, durable, and impossible to counterfeit. But there was a reason these shells eventually caused an economic collapse that wiped out the wealth of entire nations. Hold a cowrie shell in your hand. It's smooth, cool, and shaped like a closed eye. It feels like porcelain. In ancient China, India, and across Africa, these weren't just decorations. They were global cash. They were the perfect size for small transactions, a handful for a goat, a bag for a bride's dowry. The sound of 1,000 shells clinking together in a burlap sack is the sound of 14th century commerce. It was the first universal money because you couldn't just find it anywhere. It primarily came from the Maldives. The curse was that as shipping technology improved, Europeans began flooding markets with billions of shells, causing the world's first hyperinflation. But as the value of shells washed away, people turned to something you could actually eat. Something that came with a very specific, sharp danger if you handled it wrong. We use it today without thinking, but in the ancient world, salt was white gold. Roman soldiers were often paid in salt, which is where the word salary comes from. But have you ever wondered why salt vanished as a currency? Why would we stop using something that everyone literally needs to survive? Imagine the sensation of a salt brick. It's heavy, abrasive, and it leaves a stinging dust on your skin. In places like Ethiopia, these amole bricks were used as money well into the 20th century. People would actually lick the bricks to ensure they were pure salt and not just stone. It was the ultimate utility money. If you couldn't find a buyer for your salt, you could always just eat it. It preserved meat, it kept you alive. The problem was portability. If it rained, your bank account melted. If you lived in a humid climate, your wealth literally evaporated into the air. But while salt was melting away, the Aztecs were using something even more delicious. Something that required a secret recipe to ensure it wasn't a fake. In the Aztec Empire, you could buy a rabbit for 10 cacao beans. But because these beans were so valuable, the world saw its first organic counterfeiters. There was a way to fake a cacao bean that was so convincing, even the most experienced traders could be fooled until they tried to use them. The smell of raw cacao is earthy, bitter, and deep. It's not the sweet chocolate we know today. To the Aztecs, this was the drink of the gods. Because the beans were hard to grow and easy to count, they became the perfect medium for exchange. People would actually carry small pouches of beans, and the clacking sound of beans in a pouch was the sound of a wealthy person walking by. Counterfeiters would carefully peel the skin off a bean, fill it with sand or mud, and glue it back together. You only realized you'd been robbed when you went to make a drink. But while the Aztecs were protecting their beans, civilizations in the Pacific were using money so massive that you couldn't even move it. Raising the question, if you can't move your money, do you really own it? On the island of Yap, they used rye stones. Some of these stones weigh more than a car. The mystery is this: how do you spend a stone that is too heavy to lift? And what happens when the stone accidentally falls to the bottom of the ocean? These stones aren't native to Yap. They were paddled over from islands hundreds of miles away. The value wasn't in the stone itself, but in the story of the journey. The texture is rough, cold limestone. If you bought a house with a rye stone, you didn't move the stone. You just told everyone the stone now belonged to the other guy. It stayed in his front yard. Even if a stone sank during a storm, the islanders agreed it still existed and held value. It was the world's first blockchain, a shared mental ledger, but this system was destroyed by a single Irish-American sea captain who figured out a cheat code that made the stones worthless overnight. And while he was devaluing stones, the Western world was obsessed with a metal that wasn't actually metal at all. Before paper money became common, many cultures used leather. In 18th century Russia and even ancient China, squares of white deer skin or seal hide were used as banknotes. But there was a visceral, animal problem with this currency that led to a very strange form of theft that paper money never had to worry about. Leather money had a distinct scent, the musky, oily smell of cured hide. It was soft to the touch, unlike the harsh metal coins of the era. It was quiet money. It didn't jingle. In Alaska, the Russian-American company issued parchment money made of seal skin. The problem? During times of famine, people would get so hungry that they would actually eat their wallets. Your life savings became dinner. But as we moved away from currency you could eat, we moved towards something that changed the very sound of our pockets. The transition to the first true coins. The first coin ever made wasn't gold or silver. It was a natural alloy called electrum, but there's a mystery in why it was stamped with a lion's head. It wasn't for decoration. It was to solve a specific type of physical fraud that was killing trade in the Mediterranean. The Lydian lion feels different from a modern coin. It's thick, like a golden bean, and surprisingly heavy for its size. Before this, you had to weigh raw metal at every transaction. The stamping of the lion was a royal guarantee of purity. The sound of these hitting a stone counter was the sound of the birth of the modern world. No more scales, no more arguments, just the stamp. But the stamp only worked if you trusted the king. The moment that trust broke, the metal became just metal. Which leads us to the most forgotten thing of all, the transition to paper, which people initially hated because it felt weightless and fake. We have spent thousands of years trying to turn value into something we can touch, smell, and hold. We notched sticks to remember our promises. We dove for shells to prove our status, and we carved stones to anchor our history. Today, our money is invisible. It's a flicker of electrons in a server farm. We've gained convenience, but we've lost the tactile connection to our own labor. When you hold a tally stick, you're holding a piece of a tree that grew while someone worked. When you hold a cowrie shell, you're holding a piece of the ocean that someone crossed. The forgotten things of our economy remind us that money isn't just math. It's a story we all agree to believe in. What is the oldest physical thing you remember using as money? Maybe it was a specific type of marble in the schoolyard, or a rare trading card that felt more valuable than a $20 bill. I want to hear about your playground currencies in the comments below. Let's reconstruct the things we've lost, one memory at a time. Don't forget to subscribe to keep uncovering the capsules of our past. I'll see you in the next one.